guys, Chad here with Happy Viking Games, doing another beginner's tip video. And today we're going to go over the phases in Magic, which some people may not know. But to be good at Magic, you definitely need to understand the game as a whole. So the first phase is the untap phase. So you can't do anything in your untap phase. All you're going to do is, you do it at the beginning of your turn, you're just going to untap all your cards. The only time you wouldn't untap a card is if your opponent or you had defect that made your guy not untap. Otherwise, you always untap before you do anything. Then you immediately go into your upkeep phase. Your upkeep phase is where it checks for certain artifacts and things like that, do things during your upkeep. But mostly, it's just for if you want to play an instant before you draw, you can do that, and so can your opponent. The next phase is the draw phase, and the first thing you're going to do in your draw phase is draw a card. You can't really do anything in this phase either, except play instants. But it's kind of cool because if your opponent draws a card and you have an instant speed discard spell, you can play the discard spell after they've drawn their card, and they'll discard it. The next step is main phase 1. In your first main phase, you can play a land, you can play sorcery, you can just, your main phase is the phase where you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can play your cards, you can do everything but attack. So it's the phase where you just play your creatures and play your sorceries and play your lands and advance your board. And guys, remember, whenever you cast a spell, whether it be a creature, whether it be a sorcery or an instant, your opponent always has priority after you've cast it to respond. They always have the ability to respond to your spell, and your spell may not come into play. So for more on that, click here. The next phases are the combat phases, and it's really one phase, it's the combat phase, but it's got 4 steps into it, which is the beginning of combat, the declare attacking, the declare blocking, and the resolve combat phase. And so what happens in the combat phase is, this is the phase where you decide what your creatures you're going to attack with. So in the beginning of combat phase, your opponent can play cards that maybe tap your guys or do things like that. But if they don't do that, you're free to attack. So now, in your declare attackers phase, you declare attackers. And then there's another window where you can cast instants or sorceries before they block. And then they can declare blockers. And then after they declare blockers, there's another window where you can cast instants, where you can pump your guy or kill their guy or just do a lot of things. And then after all that's done, if they've blocked, if we've attacked and they've blocked or they haven't blocked and no spells were played, there's a combat resolution phase where you figure out how much damage they've taken, what creatures die, and things like that. For more on the combat phases, just click right here. The next phase is the main phase 2. And what that is exactly the same thing as main phase 1, it's just after combat. So if you haven't played a land for the turn, you can play a land. If you want to play a creature after you've attacked, you can play a creature, you can play a sorcery. The reason why main phase 2 is good is because it gives you an option. Maybe you didn't know if they were going to block with their guy, or you had a plan, you didn't really know what was going to happen, and you wanted to attack first to see what you wanted to do. So main phase 2 lets you see what happens in combat and then play your spells. Alright, and the last part of your turn is the end of turn step. And on the end of turn step, you can play instants, so can your opponent. So you can wait for instance, if it's their end of their turn, you can wait till the end of their turn and then you can try to kill their guys or play an instant that's really sweet and does some cool things. And then after the end of turn step, it's a cleanup phase where it checks cards in hand, things like that. So if someone has more than 7 cards in their hand, they discard in the cleanup step. And that's the phases in Magic. It's basic understanding of the phases that makes you better at Magic, and that's all it is. So I hope this helped. Join us next time for beginner tips. Thanks, guys.